Can we start with where were you and what were you doing on September 11th, 2001?
I got to tell you, I don't think I have an incredible story. I have a story, and I did my job, and that's what the country expected of me. And there are so many people that did way more. At the end of the day, though, the American people paid me to do my job. September 11th, 2001 was one of those days. And I think it's interesting you bring that up, because a lot of people, the younger people now, don't recall the searing experience that had for so many of us. It was in the morning, and it was a beautiful fall day, just one of those magical days. And the non-commissioned officer that I was working with, Sergeant Major Mel Bynum, was my partner, and we decided to go for this beautiful run in the morning. And we ran around. We were at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. We were in the 5th Special Forces Group, which is the Special Forces Group that's responsible. The Special Forces Groups are responsible for different parts of the world. Our part of the world was the Middle East. And we went for a run, and it was just magnificent. And it was one of those days that starts, and you're just like, this is going to be a great day. Thinking about going home early, and like, take the kids out. And we got in the car, and we were driving back to work because we were at this outstation called Clarksville Base. It was just one of those days. And on the radio, I was listening to this really probably inappropriate morning show. It was called the John Boy and Billy Show. It was only in the South, right? It was really funny, at the time. And all of a sudden, the announcer broke in and said, "Hey, something's happened." And it wasn't funny. It was like something really dramatic has changed in our lives. We have a report of a plane crashing in to the World Trade Center. And it was just so striking, the tone of voice. There was no joking anymore. You're like, okay. And as you recall, like back in 1942, I'm making that up, small plane crashed into the Empire State Building. So the pundits were like, oh, maybe it's nothing. By the time we got back to work and I walked in to our intelligence section in the unit I was in 3rd Battalion, 5th Special Forces Group, walk in there. And you know how sometimes history, when you look back on things, you're like, did I really experience that? Or did my mind create that after the fact? Well, and so I've thought about this a lot. I walked in, they had the TV on, and we saw the second plane go into the building. Mm-hmm. And I always have to think back. I'm like, did you really see that? Or have you just seen it happen so many times? So that happened. And I was like, is that live? And everybody goes, that's live. And I said, okay, our world's just changed at that moment. And it was funny. Well, it wasn't funny. That's a horrible word to say. We knew that we were going to go to war. I don't know why. And I was a company commander, which is a major, I was responsible for 6 12-man A teams. And there were men at the time. Now, thank goodness, there are women in them. Biggest change we should have done 20 years ago, but that's neither here nor there. Thank goodness. But at the time, they were 12-man A teams. And the 12-man Special Forces A team consists of 2 medics, 2 engineers, 2 communications experts, 2 weapons experts, 2 senior non-commissioned officers that handle operations and intelligence, and then 2 officers. So I was in charge of 6 of those. And what I had was that's an A team. I had a B team, which is a headquarters element of, about 10 people. So we're like, wow, something just changed. I got called over to the battalion headquarters. There's A team, company commander, battalion. So battalion has 3 companies. Each company has 6 A teams. So in the battalion, there are 18 A teams. And we went into the battalion commander's office, and what I really recall was this, hey, there's nothing to see here. Things happen in the world all the time. Just dial it down a notch. That's what I heard. I'm like, no, the world fundamentally changed. And here was the crazy thing. And this is the genius of the Special Forces that I don't think I really appreciated at the time. We left that meeting, and I walked over to the company I commanded. And it was this old crappy it wasn't World War II, it was a Vietnam era building. It was just nasty. And we had this long hall, and I walked in, and every A team had pulled all their equipment out of their wall lockers and had lined it up in the hallway, and everybody's going through checking their equipment, checking batteries, making sure things are maintained, making sure nothing's broken. And I was like, okay, game on. They knew. So our A teams were like, they knew we're going to war. And they're like, what's up, sir? And I'm like, keep going. We're going to war. But that was not the instructions I was given from my higher headquarters at that time. But we all knew the game was on and that we were going to be a critical part of that. We knew it was bin Laden. Everybody goes, don't jump ahead of yourself. This isn't Al Qaeda. We're like, yeah, it is.
So, Chris, when you think about kind of the days after September 11th, there was a whole bunch in the public sphere of, what happened, who did it, why, and kind of a crash course, if you will, on extremism, especially on the religious front in the Middle East, and kind of why there would be such deep hatred for America and the American ideals. What was transpiring at the highest levels of our military over those days? So on September 11th specifically, it was dial it down. This isn't a big deal. But at some point between that and I think early December of 2001, we end up training and invading Afghanistan. And so kind of how do we get from the response on September 11th, which was maybe a little bit more lackadaisical, to actually going to Afghanistan?
Thanks, Anthony. And so it was so interesting. I was like an eyewitness to history. I call it like the fly in the wall. Like, I don't know why I experienced all this. Serendipity, fate, karma. I really don't know what it is. And as the things developed, you've read in the books now that there was a Camp David meeting, like right after the 11th, where I think who was director? George Tenet, I think, was director of the CIA at the time. And there was this meeting with President Bush where they're like, Tenet's like, we're going to get this on. And the other guy, Cofer Black, was the head of counterterrorism, legendary guy, let the flies walk over their eyeballs or something. I forgot he had this great line that still resonates. I just remember, so I didn't know that meeting happened. I was instructed by our group commander, A team, company, battalion, group. Group has 3 battalions of, 3 companies of 6 A teams. I know it's confusing as heck, but that's the big deal. And at the time, it was a guy named legendary guy, Colonel John Mulholland. He retired as a lieutenant general, just absolutely legendary figure that I've just like been a mentor to me. It's like, oh my gosh, he's like my second father. I can't say enough good about him. I'd worked with then Colonel Mulholland prior, and he goes, Chris, go down to the United States Central Command. That's CENTCOM. That's the military organization that's responsible for the Middle East. And go down there. And his instructions were, get us in the fight. And I was like, I know how that means. Mission type order. That's pretty good. Went down there, left on the 16th of September. The reason I remember that date is it's my anniversary. And usually my wife would be extremely upset with me for taking off on our anniversary. And this is the one time she's like, get the hell out of here. It was really, and that's when I knew it was serious. I knew it was serious. Thousands of Americans were killed, but I'm like, wow. So went down there, and here was what I learned, Anthony. And people will now say, oh, that's revisionist history. I'm just going to try to relate to you what I experienced at the time. I was a Green Beret. I was a Special Forces officer. The purpose of United States Army Special Forces Green Berets is to conduct unconventional warfare. Unconventional warfare is when small teams, 12-man teams or smaller, go behind enemy lines into a hostile a nation state that's controlled by a hostile regime, in this case, the Taliban. You go behind enemy lines, you link up with resistance forces, insurgents, guerrillas, and then we, Green Berets, will provide them training, advice, support, air support, logistics support, and help them take back their country from the ruling regime. So, I'd been in Special Forces at that point, 2001. I went in Special Forces in 93. Do the math. I'm not going to do public math and just
don't do public math.
And went in there, and we're like, this is what the regiment was created to do. The Special Forces Regiment, the Green Berets, had never truly conducted an unconventional warfare campaign. The reason Special Forces and unconventional warfare, if you recall World War II, and you recall occupied France, and small commando elements dropped in before D-Day and worked with McKee and the resistance forces and brought them together and helped them and communicate. That's kind of what our thing was. And then after World War II, there were these visionary people that Aaron Bank and some others, that father of special forces, said, we can't get rid of this because the Soviet Union is going to invade Western Europe. So we're going to have these Green Berets, they're going to stay behind or they're going to jump behind enemy lines. And then we're going to have this flames are going to build in the rear of the Soviets, and we're going to, take them out from behind. So that's kind of the classic unconventional warfare. That's what special forces, Green Berets, were created to do. And we'd never really done it. Some people will say, oh, we kind of did it here and there. Like, we never did it. So I'm going to get hate mail now. Oh, actually, Chris, in 1982 in Pakistan, whatever. I'm just saying that we really hadn't done it. And so going down there was like, we know what to do. This is tailor-made for unconventional warfare. Here's the thing. The military doesn't always like the weirdo special operators because they kind of they don't wear uniforms all the time. They grow their hair long, facial hair, stuff that the big military typically doesn't like. And the big military was like, we have a plan. What we're going to do is we're going to go invade the country. And this is how we're going to do it. We have all these forces in Europe, tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, tons of infantrymen, artillerymen. And what we're going to do is we're going to put them on trains. We're going to move them down to Uzbekistan. We're going to mass combat power through the winter. And when the spring, because the mountains, all this stuff you brought up, like we didn't know a lot about it. We'd heard, you read Rudyard Kipling and watched, movies, and we're like, this is going to be really bad. So the military, the large military, was like a very conventional approach. And they were going to come down there and build combat power. And then in the spring, they do this big, tanks coming across bridges and floating, crossing rivers and stuff, and helicopters flying in and all this stuff. And we're like, yeah, we don't have time for that. And so it was one of those moments where the senior leadership was desperate for solutions. And I think the CIA had come up with some ideas too, like I noted earlier in their meeting at Camp David with President Bush. So this was my interpretation, and I was there, by the way, was, oh crap, we need some ideas to Secretary Rumsfeld like yesterday. Anybody have them? And all of a sudden, those of us that were Green Berets, it was like, hey, are there any Green Berets here? Like, yeah, you forgot about us. Here we are. We're just sitting here drinking coffee. We got the call, and they're like, we need a concept yesterday. We'd already had it done. This guy, Bob Kelly, there were just some remarkable people down there. And I think it became, oh, okay, well, we got to do something. Yeah, let the Green Berets go do their thing. Let them mess around. And then they'll kind of prepare for when the major military forces move in. And then when the spring offensive comes, they can help with that. So that was my recollection, and it's right on how that thing went down.